Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today at the webinar for Getting Set Up in Singapore. What are the jurisdictional advantages for fund managers? I'll hand you over to my colleague, Connie Wong. Thank you, Connie.
Thank you, Ellie. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Connie Wong. I am the Executive Director of Waystone based in Singapore. Waystone has over 20 years of experience in providing governance and compliance solutions to fund managers globally. Today, we want to take this opportunity introducing Argus team to our fellow industry friends and clients. Argus has joined Waystone in June this year and is part of our global compliance solutions team. I'm very delighted to have Sachin and Nithi joining with me on this webinar. Before we get into the details, I would like to invite both of you to give us an overview introduction of yourselves and also about Argus.
Sure. Thank you, Connie. Hello, everyone, and thank you for all joining this webinar. Let me take you through first about the Argus and myself, and then I will hand it over to Nithi. I am the one who founded the Argus in 2017. Thereafter, I have Dipesh Agarwal, who joined me as a managing director in a very early stage of our business, followed by Nithi as a director of compliance. What we do primarily, we are being a regulatory compliance consulting firm. We primarily focus on to the financial institutions, how we help them, or the kind of clients we get. Basically, the clients who are either regulated or desire to be regulated, we provide them a very solution approach to deliver our services. How we do that? We take, again, the approach is very cradle to nirvana, where we help them to, if they are looking to set up a business here and get the journey of a fund management, say fund management as an example, or a fund manager, we help them to start with the setup of the organization here, which is corporate compliances, followed by doing their licensing application, doing their compliance policies, processes, ongoing compliance monitoring, internal audit, training, and other corporate compliances. Again, the offerings are pretty bespoke. We look into what clients really wanted, and the solutions is provided that manner. Our clients, as I talked about, our clients are financial institutions. Primarily, these are fund managers, but we do cater our services to other institutions like payment services, licensed financial advisors, insurance broker, so on and so forth. Nithi, you may proceed to give you an introduction, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Sachin. Thank you, Connie. Firstly, very happy to be here today and be part of this webinar. A quick background to myself. I'm a compliance professional. Have about 15 years of experience, regulatory compliance experience in Singapore. I started off doing compliance for the bank, and then I moved on to do compliance for in-house leverage FX broking entity. And then after that, I've been doing regulatory compliance consulting in Singapore. And I've joined Argus, and I'm now part of the Argus family, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Sachin and Nithi. And I guess just the first question to Nithi, similar to the topic here today. What are the jurisdictional advantages for fund managers? So why is Singapore jurisdictionally important for a lot of fund managers?
Thanks, Connie. So I think why Singapore is a good place to be based for fund managers, I would look at it maybe in 4 to 5 areas. The first one is the growth outlook. Singapore, because of where it's located, it is very well positioned to take advantage of the growth in this part of the world, especially China. And, given that, in terms of what we're looking at, how the regulators are pushing the asset management industry here in general, in terms of legislation, favorable laws and regulations here. At the moment, I think, we have about 3.4 trillion assets that are already under management. And we're looking at over 890 fund managers who are based out of Singapore. And these numbers are only going to increase. So in terms of growth outlook, I think Singapore as a location is very ideal, especially if fund managers are looking to target investors and money from this part of the world. The second reason I would say is very strong regulatory environment. and political environment. Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, is the central bank and integrated financial regulator. So you have the sole single regulatory body that oversees all of the financial institutions. There's a lot of transparency in terms of understanding the laws, and in terms of getting regulated in Singapore is a very straightforward, transparent process, which makes it quite a favorable reason for foreign fund managers to consider Singapore as a location. The other aspect of it is as well, when you're a fund manager, you're looking to get institutional money, especially, they are looking for fund managers to be based in a a good environment. I would say good meaning, transparent, politically stable environment. And Singapore fits all of those criteria. Singapore as a Financial Action Task Force member, I think that also adds to the advantage. As a member of Financial Action Task Force, the risk of Singapore as a country risk is low. And again, that bolsters the reasons why fund managers would want to consider Singapore as a good location. And then the third element would be tax incentives. As I mentioned, Singapore wants to be the asset management hub in this part of the world. I would even dare say the equivalent of Cayman. And therefore, there are lots of tax advantages that have been built into the legislation. You have double tax treaties that Singapore has signed with various countries. That in itself is also attractive for foreign managers. We also have very specific tax incentives for fund managers. Specifically, we have the 13X and the 13R, which is the enhanced fund manager tax scheme, and the income specified tax scheme. And again, these are I won't go into the details of the tax schemes. However, these tax schemes are there to basically encourage fund managers to set up their fund management entity here, as well as the fund vehicle to be based out of Singapore. And then lastly, I would say the other aspect is the business environment. Singapore is also trying to be the fintech hub in this part of the world. There are lots of grants. There's a lot of money that has been put into encouraging new startups, new fintech solutions to be headquartered in Singapore, to again bolster and make Singapore attractive for foreign fund managers to come and set up their base here. If you look at the workforce as well, Singapore has a very good, educated workforce that is again there to fill in the employment requirements and capabilities that is needed to grow this country to meet the demands of foreign fund managers. So I think in general, these are the managers should definitely look at Singapore as an ideal location.
And you're right, and Lisa, I do very much agree with you. Singapore is definitely a favorable jurisdiction for a lot of the managers globally to put a presence and maybe put an outfit in Singapore. So if you can maybe share with us, I know some of the managers here today, they're relatively new to Singapore or maybe relatively new to the region. So if you can share with us some of the different types of fund management regimes in Singapore, and how is the licensing process look like?
Sure. So as I mentioned, Singapore, the MAS is looking to establish Singapore as a hub for asset management, and it is already doing that. So in line with that, I think the licensing regime for fund managers is thought through very carefully to remain attractive and transparent for fund managers to get onboarded here. In general, there are 4 categories of licensing categories that fund managers can fall under. The first one is called the Registered Fund Manager regime. It's not a license. It is, however, an approval from the regulator to operate as a fund manager here within certain parameters. You are only able to deal with accredited or institutional investors, up to 30 qualified investors. And there's a limit that you can only manage up to 250 million assets, Singapore dollars. If you're able to operate within these guidelines, then you can go and apply for the registered fund management company application. And then the one next up is called the Capital Market Services License for Fund Management, dealing with accredited and institutional investors. So under this category, this is a license under the Capital Market Services category, which is regulated under the Securities Futures Act. And the main restriction under this category is that you can only deal with accredited or institutional investors. In other jurisdictions, you may refer to these as the professional investors. Again, majority, I would say, of our clients tend to fall under this bucket. And then the one up after that is basically the licensed fund management category dealing with retail. So there are no restrictions. You can deal with, anyone, any type of investors under that particular category. And that will be the most stringent licensing category here in Singapore. And then lastly, we've got the most light touch regime for fund managers, and that's called the venture capital fund managers. They still are considered to be licensed under the capital market services category, but it's only specifically for managers who want to operate as a VC venture capital fund managers. There are certain restrictions in terms of the type of venture capital funds that you can manage, and it's also restrictive in terms of the type of investors that you can deal with, namely accredited or institutional investors. So I would say these are the four buckets or categories of approval or licenses that one can obtain should you wish to operate here in Singapore.
And thanks, Nithya. And I guess the next question I have to you is about VCC. There's a lot of conversation, a lot of chat in the markets about VCC, variable capital companies. And also, Waystone, we have offices, we're 10 offices around the globe, and a lot of our managers from US, from Europe, from China, from Hong Kong, they all ask about this new fund vehicle. So if you can tell us a bit more of what is a VCC and how can a fund manager set up a fund vehicle here?
Sure. So I think before I go into the specifics of VCC, just to give you a bit of background. So Singapore before VCC still had other fund structures. We still have the private limited company structure. We have the limited partnerships. We have the the unit trust type of structures here as well. And VCC was added fairly newly. Again, VCC, the variable capital company, was set up to basically, again, make it attractive for fund managers to consider Singapore as a fund domicile hub. And VCC is written in such a manner that it is meant to allow closed-ended funds as well as open-ended funds to take advantage of this structure. In terms of the specific requirements or characteristics of the VCC, I would say, namely, there are, I would say, 6 or 7 key requirements or characteristics to take note of. A VCC has to be managed by a Singapore regulated fund manager. So you can't have a foreign fund manager be the manager of a VCC incorporated in Singapore. So this is something to take note of, because we often get inquiries from foreign fund managers where they want to set up a VCC here, but they are not yet regulated here in Singapore as a fund manager. You need to have a Singapore-based company secretary and registered office, and you have to be subject to Singapore-based auditors, and make sure that financial statements are prepared according to international standards. There are also tax incentives that VCCs can take advantage of. These tax incentives, namely 13X, 13R, are already present here in Singapore, and VCC is able to take advantage of the existing tax incentive schemes that are present. And then the other thing to note as well is that because Singapore government is promoting VCC and trying to grow Singapore as a fund domicile hub, it is also issuing various grants to cover some of the expenses incurred by fund managers in setting up the VCC. So in terms of the requirements and looking at the minimum requirements to be met, the incorporation of the VCC, I would say, is fairly easy process, just like how you would set up a normal company in Singapore. However, what is the main difference here is that before you set up the VCC, you have to speak to various service providers. Particularly, you need to ensure that you engage with the tax advisors, the legal firms to help you draft the constitution document, as well as advise you on what is the appropriate manner to set it up. Because under the variable capital company, you can have standalone VCC as well as an umbrella VCC, as we call it. So underneath the umbrella VCC, you can set up various sub-funds to be managed within the umbrella. So again, the advantages of having a single VCC versus an umbrella VCC with various sub-funds, that all depends on the type of strategy that you're employing, the type of investors that you're targeting. You can even incorporate a VCC structure into a master feeder type of an arrangement as well. So there are lots of ways that VCC comes into play when you're looking at structuring your funds. And that's why tax and legal advice is especially important before you decide to go down the path of deciding what type of VCC you're going to incorporate. Is it a standalone umbrella? Is that going to be a feeder or a master structure as part of the overall fund structure that you're going to put in place? I would say, yeah, these are the key things to note.
Thanks, Nithi. And we did receive some of the questions in advance to the webinar, and some of the questions are in particular to relating to VCC. And one question here they were asking, so what is the cost of setup and maintenance, as well as the regulatory requirements and tax obligations of a Singapore fund?
Sure. So I think in terms of setting up the VCC, as I mentioned, it's quite a straightforward incorporation process, but you have to get the appropriate advice first before going down the registration of the VCC with ACRA. There are certain annual filing obligations as well that you would need to do. A key thing to remember about VCC is that it is a hybrid between like a normal company and a fund vehicle. So there are certain requirements that you have to meet in terms of, if you're going to appoint a new director or a new service provider or anything like that, you may have to pass certain board resolutions. And the other aspect of the VCC is the constitution. So within the constitution, there are lots of conditions that will be already written into that the VCC will operate within. So for a VCC, you have to look at it. There is the constitution, there is the ACRA, which is the business regulatory body here. That has certain conditions you have to comply with, as well as the fund prospectus documents. So the VCC would have to make sure that all three are sort of connected and reading properly. So setting up the VCC, again, just to emphasize, it's not a difficult process, but the background in terms of laying the foundation and having the appropriate advice is important. In terms of cost, again, it's not expensive setting up a VCC, but the legal cost involved and the tax advisory cost that can be, costly, I would say, which is why MAS has, put in place various grants. But, if you ask me the cost of setting up, say, a fund vehicle in Cayman, I don't think it would be, very different in terms of the cost structure when we think about it in that manner. There is also the option where you can re-domicile a foreign fund in Singapore under VCC. So again, the cost for that could slightly be different because you're looking at bringing in the fund from a different jurisdiction to be based out here. So sometimes the legal fees around that might be a little bit higher than usual. So yeah, and in terms of timeline, it takes, I think, couple of days or weeks to sort of get the incorporation done, and thereafter the subscription into the funds that will be done as per any other fund structure. On the compliance front, the key thing to note here is that the AML KYC obligation of the VCC falls on the manager, but the manager can outsource the certain aspects of AML KYC to a third party like a fund administrator. So that currently can be carried out, but again, the responsibilities have to be maintained and carried out effectively. So even though there's certain element of outsourcing that is happening, the fund manager has to ensure that whoever is conducting these checks on behalf of the fund, they are able to demonstrate that they are meeting the Singapore requirements in terms of AML and KYC. Appropriate checks have to be done on the service providers to ensure they have the experience as well and the capabilities to do the function for the fund managers.
And I guess that the next question I have, and I was often asked by a lot of the managers, is at what level of AUM is it feasible, for a non-Hong Kong or non-Singapore or managers, to set up a shop in Singapore?
So I think the right way to look at it is not is not via the AUM parameters, but rather, what is the motivation to set up in Singapore? So, traditionally, Singapore-based fund managers are still, setting up their funds offshore. But of course, with VCC, it is becoming, another option for Singapore fund managers to consider Singapore as a fund domicile location. If you're going to have portfolio managers sitting out here and carrying out the portfolio management function, then despite whatever size AUM that you're going to be managing, you need to be appropriately regulated here as a Singapore licensed or regulated fund manager. So I think that's important to keep in mind. The other thing is where your investors are coming from. Again, that plays a role. If you have especially institutional investors, pension funds, etc., looking to invest with you, a lot of them want fund managers to be based in a good geographical location, a good reputable jurisdiction. And so again, that is an added advantage if you are a fund manager and you're looking to target these type of institutional investors. Having the manager and the fund based out of Singapore is seen favorably.
Thanks, Nithi. I think that's very good to hear, and also good to. I also very much agree with you. When managers looking to set up the presence in Singapore, it should be mostly, to consider the motivations and also the investor base as a key consideration. So I guess just to wrap up the session we have this afternoon, and last but not the least question: what can Argus do to help managers or clients to set up as a fund manager in Singapore?
Sure. So I think the way I look at it is there are three core areas that we can help fund managers who are looking to be based here. The first one is that we can help them get appropriately licensed or regulated here under whichever category that I've mentioned earlier. We will handhold them and help them go through the application process until they get the final approval. The second area that we help fund managers after they are regulated is to be their outsourced compliance service provider, wherein we come in and we effectively build their compliance framework, the monitoring plan that we will then carry out for the company to make sure that they are not going to conduct any regulatory breaches and that they are looking at their compliance obligations on an ongoing manner, and they are documenting all of these checks. So we act as the outsourced service provider to provide the advice to them on the regulatory requirements, to assist in completing their compliance obligation, as well as being the communicator to the regulator on their behalf, should there be any need to notify the MAS on certain changes, or communicate with the MAS to seek certain approval on behalf of the client. And then the third way that we're helping fund managers, and how we can help future fund managers, is to put in place the right policies and procedures. So any fund managers, if you're looking to be based in Singapore, you need to have appropriate compliance framework that includes compliance manuals, risk management framework, appropriate policies for conducting AML, KYC checks, enterprise-wide risk assessment, and also outsourcing and technology risk management. And we effectively put these policies and procedures for our clients and make sure that it is suitable for the size and the business that they're conducting or they intend to conduct in Singapore. And then besides these three core areas, we also then help fund managers do other services such as internal audit, which is again a regulatory requirement here. We also help fund managers with training, various trainings conducted by us to comply with the continuous professional development requirements here for licensed fund managers, and to make sure that they meet their AML training obligations. And then from time to time, we also help fund managers do gap analysis, or as I call it, a laundry list of rules and regulations that are applicable to them, like a rules mapping exercise. So these are all different areas that we get involved in. And then on the fund side, we can assist to incorporate the funds, especially if it's a VCC, we can assist to incorporate the VCC. If you're looking to actively do the fund distribution in Singapore, there's also a regulatory requirement to get the funds registered to be sold and offered to Singapore investors. Primarily, you have the recognized foreign scheme and the authorized Singapore scheme, and you have the restricted Singapore scheme and the restricted foreign scheme. These are the different schemes that you can register your fund under, depending on whether you're offering the fund to retail investors or accredited investors. So that's something also that we can help foreign fund managers.
Thank you, Nathan. And this is very good to hear, a very comprehensive solutions your team offer to clients who are looking to get the setup right in the first place in Singapore. So I do very much, appreciate your time, and also Sachin time this afternoon talking through to our clients and managers, for the setup in Singapore. And thank you so much again to all the managers or clients who dial in today listening to our webinar. And if you have any questions or anything you wanted to share, we do welcome you drop us a line to Sachin, Nithi, or myself. We're happy to get on a call with you anytime to see if there's anything we can support you. So thank you again to all of you, and I wish you guys have a wonderful rest of the day.